Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. This is Brett, and we have a very special episode for you today. Before I hop into today's episode, I just want to let you know that we have set up a community space. So this is a private Facebook group. You can check out the show notes, and I would love to meet you in that group. We've got listeners from, I think, 55 or 57 countries last time I checked, and I would love to meet you in person and connect with you there. The sort of main thrust behind that Facebook group, it is a community-based platform. We are just getting started with it, but it's really a place that I would like to foster a solutions-oriented, community-oriented, collaborative type of effort to really pull together in these challenging times and beyond. So you will notice in that group that there is no fear-based narrative. We're not hitting the panic button. And for me personally, I have really moved and shifted away from the shock, the panic, and so on, and moved into more of a solutions-oriented mode. Okay, and I feel like today's episode really delivers solutions in a very, very different way. Okay, and I'll get into that in just a second. So that's the first thing. You can join that group. I would love to connect with you in person, quote unquote, and get to know you a little bit better. Okay, I have a couple of other announcements coming up, and I'm just going to sort of plant the seed here. But one of the challenges that many people are facing right now are a number of things, but access to alternative healthcare is going to be a big problem for a lot of people, whether that's having challenges with your physical location and not being able to go in to see your naturopath, your functional medicine doctor, your nutritionist, and perhaps not even being able to get to see your doctor as this pandemic grows. When you couple that with a restricted access to food in many cases, a restricted access to natural health products, which we're starting to see now, right? Products being sold out and so forth. But also, we're all taking a financial hit. Okay, so a lot of people are now struggling financially right out the gate, and we're very worried about that future. So what I'll be launching very soon is a community-based functional medicine program that is essentially shared cost. Okay, so shared cost care. And the primary focus is really going to be those people who are considered high risk in the face of this pandemic. So people with heart disease, with diabetes, with metabolic syndrome, with high blood pressure. Okay, so that's really going to be the focal point, because what we're starting to see is those high risk groups are the ones that are at the highest risk for complications from COVID-19. And so what I would like to do is to offer a solution and say, well, look, instead of looking at it from an infectious disease perspective, why don't we look at it and say, what if you got your blood sugar under control? What if you lost some weight? What if your blood pressure came down? What if you could lower your medication? And by sorting out the root cause, by restoring your health from the ground up, that's actually going to lower your risk for complications. Okay, so that's coming up. It is really, again, a community-based effort and something that I was going to roll out in my local community, but given the circumstances, I think it's actually timely and, of course, almost mandatory at this point to put that up online. So just stay tuned to the website, subscribe to the podcast so that you can keep up to speed with that. So on to today's episode. Today's episode is a very special episode for me. It is an episode that I've wanted to record since episode 1. But I feel, as they say, timing is everything, right? And I feel that today's episode could not have been timed any better. What we're witnessing out there in the public space is we're witnessing confusion. We're witnessing polarity. We're witnessing heated, polarizing, politicized debates about what is going on. And even if you consider yourself woke or consider yourself progressive or a thought leader, I'm finding that 90% of the stories that we're listening to out there are very, very fear-driven stories. Okay, and people are pushing that same narrative in the public space. And when you peel back the layers of that discussion, I think what it all boils down to is that there is something bigger that is going on with all of this. Okay, whether you want to believe that this is a man-made bioweapon, whether you want to believe that this is a conspiracy theory that is all being orchestrated, right? So people are calling this the pandemic. Whether you want to believe that this is a consequence of evolution or that this is just a freak accident of nature, whatever you believe actually doesn't really matter at this point. And here's why. When you take a step back, you're going to see that the systems that we have in place, the way that we are living our lives, and our connection to Mother Earth, to Spirit, are completely severed. And we're living in such an unsustainable way that we can simply not carry on living this way. So what this brings into focus is the fact that we're going to have to take a long, hard look at ourselves as individuals. We're also going to have to take a long, hard look at the way we're living our lives. And these systems are not going to self-correct, right? These systems are not going to self-correct. It is going to require effort. And I think it's almost going to be something that will be born out of necessity. Okay, so we're starting to witness the early stages here of a global collective awakening of consciousness. And I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you where this is all going to go. But when you listen to the teachings and the messages that Diane brings, I think now is the time to unite, to pull together in the same direction, and to actually learn from our differences. You know, if you look at nature, there is strength in biodiversity, right? Strength in biodiversity. So we need to look to our differences. We need to look to our different strengths. We need to find out who's best at doing what and pull together as a collective to move us forward into a better way of living. And yes, it's going to be difficult. Yes, there's going to be struggles. There's going to be some harsh realizations. But I want you to know that I feel, and the messages that we're going to talk about today, I feel that not only is this going to be a very good thing when we come through it, I feel like it's an absolute necessity at this moment in time. So I'm going to leave it at that. All right. And I'm honored and proud to bring to you today one of my greatest teachers, Diane Longboat. Hi, Diane. Wanted to thank you so much for taking the time out and joining me today on the podcast.
There you go, Brett. It's great to be with you.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, this is actually one of those podcasts that I personally have dreamed about since I started podcasting. I've wanted to get you on the show for so long. And, you know, you and I have known each other for many years now, and I've sat in ceremony with you for many years. And I just feel that where we are right now in the state of the world and with everything that's going on, you know, I really value and honor the teachings that you bring forward, as well as the teachings that the Indigenous people have, not just here in North America, but around the world. So I would like for you to introduce yourself and maybe just give our audience a little bit of a snapshot about who you are and what you do, and then we can sort of go from there.
Thanks so much. My Mohawk name is Gahandagwas, and it means she's picking sweetgrass. I'm Turtle Clan from Six Nations Grand River Territory, and I'm Ganyangehaga. I'm Mohawk. I'm really grateful to the legacy of my people for the powerful ceremonies that we have, the medicine societies that we have, and for all the traditional teachings that form value systems that help you to stand strong in the world. And I'm always proud to say that I'm from Six Nations. I work right now at the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health, Canada's largest hospital for those challenges. And it's a major research center, not only in Canada, but in the world. And we have a beautiful program there called Shkabe Makwa. The spirit of the bear is our helper. And in many Indigenous traditions, the bear is the healer. And so really grateful to work at CAMH with a very gifted team of people. and to do great things in not only clinical services, but doing great things in research and policy development as well. So bringing some change into the system.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that now is really the time for change, and I think that will be a running theme throughout our conversation tonight. But I want to actually just share with our audience what you are doing, because I think you sort of downplayed it a little bit. You've actually set up an Indigenous wing, if you will, and an Indigenous medicine garden at CAMH. Is that right?
Yes, it is. We've talked about that for a very long time at CAMH, and I want to uphold Vern Harper, Cree man, who was our first elder at CAMH in the Aboriginal Services Program, and Vern worked there for many years. And following Vern, I worked there, and it was in the clinical division. So seeing clients and bringing traditional teachings and bringing traditional ceremony right across the spectrum to our clients and to our patients was such a gift to me in my life. And sort of an outgrowth of that piece was always something that Vern had wanted, which was a sweat lodge. And so we worked really hard with the folks in redevelopment, and with their 100% support, they laid maps on the table in front of us and gave us choices of where we could place our ceremonial area. And so I chose a place on the west end of the property, and it has medicine gardens. It has a sacred fire where we gather for traditional teachings and ceremonies like naming ceremonies and all kinds of healing ceremonies. And it also has a sweat lodge. So it is a really beautiful location at CAMH, and it opened in June of 2016. And before I left to move over into the research and policy division of the provincial service support program, that was late 2016. And from my time building that ceremony grounds between 2013 and 2016, it was such a powerful opportunity to see so many people come through those ceremony grounds. So I left the clinical division 2016, and by June, it was about a year and a half, we had over 1,000 people come through those ceremony gardens.
Wow.
Clients, patients, people, Indigenous spiritual leaders who were visiting the city, who were Sundance leaders. We had chiefs come through. We had health directors come through from First Nation organizations, and the Governor General Leadership Council, many ministers of the provincial government. So profound interest in what we were doing to create a scenario at CAMH where traditional Indigenous healing practices and belief systems were valued as a healing modality alongside Western medicine. And I'm so grateful for that, because I do believe that there's a harmony that can be, that can be created between the two systems. And so we always look for that. We offer that opportunity to our clients and our patients when they call into CAMH to make it a choice between the programming that is offered to all Canadians, or specific culturally based programming that's offered to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And so, people will make a choice, one or the other, or they can blend both of them together. And we find a lot of our clients and patients really get so much more out of that blending piece. And so, we always support that.
Well, I feel that there's obviously benefits to both sides of that, whether you want to go left or right. But, I think, having worked with you for so long and because I've known you for so long, and listened to the teachings and sat in those ceremonies, I feel like the Indigenous way is really it's more of a reuniting with spirit, with one's own spirit. And I feel like, especially in these times, we're going to talk about that a fair bit tonight, is the spiritual side of what's going on in the world right now. And, since we're talking about the mental health side of things, we may as well just continue, and then we can sort of move on. But, something that you told me when we spoke off air was how the numbers of calls to CAMH for mental health issues has really tripled in the last couple of weeks. So perhaps you want to speak to that a little bit more.
I know that, with the new buildings that we put up, we have a brand new emergency department that we're going to be opening up this year. And they say that we've already outgrown it and we haven't even moved in there yet. So most of our people are coming in through the emergency department. And that emergency department is, in my opinion, understaffed in terms of Indigenous navigators, Indigenous psychiatrists, Indigenous social workers. And so I think there's a huge investment that needs to be made there, because that emergency department is now, I would say, the primary intake area for CAMH. And, it's grown way out of its capacity. And that's been the challenge for some years.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a very loaded question, and there's obviously many answers, but why are we seeing such a rise in mental health? Because this has not happened just in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, this has been building up for many, many years, and, mental health has become quite prominent in the world. And, I'll just share a story from my side. I remember sitting in ceremony, must have been 2007, 2008. And I remember one of the teachings was that there was going to be a wave of depression and a wave of mental health that was going to come over us for many, many people. And what was so interesting is, to just sort of sit with that in the back of your mind, and then to just carry on with life, and to now see where we are. So I don't know if you want to share any insights with that, with our audience.
Well, I remember that day in the lodge when we were sitting there in front of the sacred fire, and we had our medicine bundles in front of us. And we had just finished our prayers and our medicine songs. And I remember the Spirit visiting us that day and telling us that the greatest challenge to humanity in the coming years would be mental health. And, as much as we see that in the Americas, we have a pretty good lifestyle, particularly in North America. We suffer from a profound disease of loneliness. And so you can see kind of where that's evolving. You can see in various parts of the world where the land has been destroyed and where Indigenous cultures are under threat, that there is also challenge to mental health. So wherever you see the land speaking to you from its degradation, its destruction, wherever there's waters upon the earth that have been polluted, and mine tailings going into beautiful streams that support salmon life, and where you see plastic in the oceans, and even today in the ice in the Arctic Ocean. All of that points to a contravention of the natural laws of Mother Earth. And as human family, we're the only living beings on Mother Earth that have been gifted by the Creator with free will and a mind to be able to use that free will and that mind in a good way or in a ego-centered way where greed predominates. And I think we can see where we are at today because we did contravene those natural laws. And so when you do that, you create imbalance within yourself, your family, your community, and in the world. And that imbalance is playing itself out so beautifully today, where you can see the haves and the have-nots. You can see an American health system that serves rich people through insurance companies but the poor walk in that country with little or no options for healthcare. So, what we're seeing is not only have the natural laws been contravened, but the imbalance that has been created from that process is now playing out in the human family. So we cannot go beyond those natural laws and say, we're going to dominate the earth, we're going to control everything, we're going to take what we want, we don't ever have to be grateful for what we have, this earth is ours for the taking. Like, that mentality is a death mentality. It is the mentality that will cause the current systems that we have, whether it's government, the legal system, the court system, the health system, the education system, the social safety net that we have, those will collapse. The empire will collapse. And I think that's what we're seeing all around us today is, if you're unbalanced as a human being, the world around you is going to be unbalanced.
Mm-hmm. And really, I mean, many of these teachings, they go back so far, the sages and the mystics thousands of years ago. When you start tapping into things like Ayurvedic teachings and yogic teachings, I mean, that's really what they talk about, right? Is, the universe inside of you, and you are the environment, you are your environment. And I feel, from my side anyway, I feel like for so long we acknowledged that, we knew that, we lived in harmony with that to some degree. And, perhaps you want to elaborate on that. At some point along our path, we somehow forgot that we were caretakers and stewards of the land and of Mother Earth. And somehow we were all in it for ourselves. And I think if we look at the last 30 years, 20 years with the development of technology, that's just reinforced all of that, and I feel taken it to the brink.
Mm-hmm. I really think that, going back to Indigenous knowledge systems and stories of creation are really helpful for people in the world in general to know about. And, that's not sharing our ceremonies. What that is sharing traditional knowledge systems that will help us to restore that balance. Because in those original teachings, they talk about the creation of the world and the duties and the responsibilities that human family have for taking care of creation. And, there's so much degradation in the world today, and we see how we've turned the absolute degradation of Mother Earth, we've turned it on ourselves now. The fact that there's more Indigenous children in care today, in foster care today, than at the height of the residential school system. Like, that statistic alone is appalling, and that should call society's attention to the needs of Indigenous children, removed from their communities, removed from their languages, their cultures, and that very, very critical attachment. If you don't have attachment in your young years, then, you can just bet on the trajectory of that individual's life. And yet thousands and thousands of Indigenous children are taken from their families, their communities, and, have to end up trying to heal their whole lives to try to get some semblance of balance again. So, when we talk about those original teachings, we talk about responsibilities and duties to the natural world, to each other, and the human family. And those teachings, no one knows how old those teachings are. They say, the Creator gave them to us at the beginning of time so that we would know how to live in this place that He created, He, she, they created for us. And so, what are those teachings? What are those values? What is it that Indigenous peoples and nations have that they can share with the world that are going to bring people's minds back to a place of peace, a place of understanding, deep understanding, and a place where we can begin to forgive each other for the genocide that we have committed upon each other in the waves of history throughout human history. We have created waves of genocide upon each other, and nobody knows, how to colonize better than those who have been colonized. So your question really goes back to the beginning. How was it when we were fresh and new on the earth as human family? How did we interact with each other? How did we communicate with spirit to be able to get our knowledge systems and ways of being in learned practice here on the earth? Because we always say that we come from the stars. So when we say that, we mean that we have to learn how to live here on the earth in this place that the Creator made for us. So we go back to our traditional knowledge systems in every Indigenous nation to be able to understand what are those sacred duties that we have here on the earth to be able to fulfill in a way that will bring peace, that will bring abundance, that will bring sharing and caring for one another, upholding each other with difference, and seeing difference as a rich opportunity to learn from each other. So,
Wow.
all of those values are so important, and yet we're not manifesting those values because people have forgotten their original teachings. And when you forget that, it's easy to turn from the Creator, to forget who the Creator is, to engage in degradation of the land and resources and the natural world, the beings in the natural world. What we're facing now is with this COVID-19 virus is possible extinction of the human family, possible extinction. And so haven't we created degradation on the earth where species have become extinct? Like, we'll look at the website for the World Wildlife Fund. The last time I looked at it, it made me cry that, 62% of the population of the world's animals and plants and biodiversity is gone. We as human beings have created that extinction. But, the natural laws say whatever you do to the earth, you do to yourself. So now what have we done to ourselves to create this extinction through COVID-19 virus that is moving across the face of the earth? It's natural law. Whatever you give up, it's going to come back to you.
Yeah. And I mean, it's inevitable in that sense. And I think part of that is because we have become, we're not part of nature anymore in our own minds. We have been so disconnected from nature that we think that we are above the laws of nature, that we live outside of nature. And when you look at the economy is a fantastic example. Everyone is so concerned about the economy right now, and rightfully so. We all need money to survive and pragmatic day-to-day life, but the very few people recognize and remember that every single thing that fuels that economy comes from the earth. It all comes from natural resources, but economists will say that that's an externality, that they don't matter. And you sort of have to wonder to yourself, if you're operating a linear system on a finite planet, at some point you got to hit the wall, and things are going to run out, things are going to be polluted, systems are going to break down and degrade. And because we are nature, because we are intricately connected with our environment, we are naturally going to follow suit. And I think that's what's happening now. But I wanted to also ask you, the way that I've sort of looked at this anyway, and you and I have spoken about this outside of the podcast, I really feel like we're moving into a completely different way of life after this. Like a lot of people I hear out there, a lot of people are sort of thinking that, well, it's going to be 3 weeks and then let's go back to the way that we were living, or, well, it's going to be 6 months and then we'll go back to how things were. And I just can't get into that. I think that this is really the moment where a lot of these systems that are not sustainable anymore are going to have a complete overhaul and recalibration so that we can change tack. And, I would just love to get your insight on that, because I know we've spoken about that before.
Well, I'd really like to, think that these systems are going to self-evaluate, but, systems don't do that. Systems just keep running in and of themselves. This time period that we live in right now, and the fact that this microbe has brought humanity to its knees, it can bankrupt our economic system. It can completely change the way we live, the way we eat, the way that we interact with each other. And I think, as horrific as this virus is, and, just because you make it through one wave doesn't mean, it's over. There's a second wave that's coming, and maybe a third. And how do we know, there isn't a fourth? So, coming through this time period, I think we need to self-evaluate, self-reflect as human beings on what is important to us in our lives. What is it that we value above all things? What is it that we are prepared to fight for? What is it that we are prepared to engage our leadership on so that change does happen? And, God bless these millennials and all the young people underneath that age group, because they're the ones that have a really clear view of what we need to do going forward. They're going to be our next wave of leaders, and things are going to be different under their watch. I have no doubt in that. And, you see little Greta Thunberg, and you see Autumn Peltier, and a lot of our young people who are standing up now in their very early teens, and they're talking at the United Nations. They're talking in front of the leaders of the world in many different forums, at the World Economic Forum, and they're challenging, the mind of these individuals who believe that they're in power, and what I want to say about that is that is an illusion. That sense of economic power to control the world and to control society is an illusion. And the ones who are seeing clearly through that illusion are the young people. So I have a lot of respect for them, and I uphold them, because they're the movers and shakers. They're the ones with the energy to bring that change forward. But they also, as young people, need the support and the guidance and the wisdom of elders to be able to initiate the change that's needed. So, that's, I think we're living in a profoundly transformational time. And I know, that with these months as they pass by where we're quarantined, that, there's a huge amount of self-reflection that is going on within families. Mm-hmm. And people are really looking at, how are we living, and are we happy living this way? And what is it about this economic system that is creating economic slavery in our countries of the world? What is that system, and why does that system need to implode, collapse, and rebuild?
Mm-hmm. And I feel that is exactly what is happening and what is coming down the pipeline. If you just think about people who are perhaps your age, and contrast that and think about back when you were, I don't know, or people your age were in their 20s, think about what life was like then versus someone who's in their 20s now. And you think about trying to buy a home in a city and start a family, and have the things, quote unquote, that our parents have and our grandparents have, and that's a pipe dream for most people. They just, you cannot get by. I mean, in a city like Toronto, where your average rent for an apartment is $2,300, you need to, as an individual, you need to be making $80,000 per year just to be able to afford that. And all these kids coming out of college, they've got degrees, they got education, and they can't make 80 grand right out the gates. So where do you go from there? And so I think you're spot on in terms of the younger generation sort of now en masse is saying, well, look, we're all slowly falling into the have-not category. and this is not sustainable, clearly. So there needs to be an uprising, springing from there. But do you feel, and again, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you feel that we are in the early stages of a revolution or an uprising or whatever you want to call it?
I think we're in the stage of consciousness raising. And that is always the stage of establishing one's own values and what they're prepared to fight for in terms of bringing change. And when I say fight for it, I don't mean, the violence and the battle and that kind of thing. What I mean is that they're going to push for change in a way that we've never seen before. En masse, thousands, millions. There's going to be a change, whether these systems want to change or not, because there is no way that following this particular global event that we can assume that things are ever going to go back to normal. There is no more normal. There is a new normal, and that's the one that we have to co-create together. And that's where Indigenous knowledge systems have to take center stage, because they're the ones that connect you to the land. They're the ones that help you to understand your duties and responsibilities to the land, and help you to see yourself within creation, not above creation. Mm-hmm. So, whether you're Indigenous in Siberia or you're Indigenous in Malaysia, those Indigenous peoples who understand a sacred and spiritual connection to the land are our most valuable people. They're the ones that are going to provide the sacred and spiritual guidance to move us forward, because that's essentially, in a nutshell, why are we in this position that we're in today? Because we've become ego-centered, not heart-centered. Mm. We have become mind-dominated, not spirit-dominated. We have separated spirituality from the way that we live and do our work. And so when you do that, you essentially say to the Creator, you got a place in my life, but it's over here, and it's only in my own personal ceremony. And when I close my medicine bundle and I walk out into the world, I can be whoever I want in that world. It doesn't work like that, Mm-hmm, so what I want to really drive home here is the importance of spirit, the importance of a spiritual belief and a connection to the world of the ancestors, to the world of spirit beings who are still dominant in that place of peace. Some people would call it heaven, They're dominant there. They're waiting to be called, to help us through these challenging times. And yet if people don't believe in them, or they've forgotten how to make a connection to them, then we're in real trouble, because now we're just running around in a state of chaos like human beings. We're like little kids not knowing what to do, and the house is burning down. That's where we're at today. The house is burning down. And, that's who's got the sacred waters, to put out the fire. Indigenous nations have those sacred waters.
Mm-hmm. And, just such powerful words and powerful teachings. And, the work that you are doing, the road that you've traveled and the places that you've been, I know that you are, together with your community, you are doing this work. So I just want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for the message that you're bringing, because I don't think that the importance can be overstated. Now is the time. And, I've set up a community space for people online, because obviously we're all in isolation. And, one of the sort of real thrusts of that community space for me and is really about, it's really about letting go of fear, moving away from panic, stepping into a genuine, heart-centered, community-based, cooperative-based approach moving forward. Because, what I feel social media has really done, to something you said earlier, it's just polarized people. The world is so polarized on every single topic, on every single front, whether it's political, whether it's environmental, whether it's sustainability, whatever topic you want to pick, people are so divided. And I really feel like now is the time that we cannot afford to be like that anymore. We cannot. And for someone who's sat in and listened to your teachings and listened to the Indigenous teachings for so many years, one thing that I remember was there was a time where, I really worked so hard with your people to figure out my own way and to figure out the work that I needed to do. And as I got busier with my work and with my family, there was a moment of sadness for me because I couldn't be in those ceremonies as much anymore. And I remember one day, one of our brothers came to me and said, your work now is out there and you don't need to be here all the time. You don't need to be at the fire all the time. And the reason why I bring that up is because something you said, it's not necessarily just about lighting sage and sitting down and, praying and meditating for 5 minutes and then carrying on with your life. It's about how you treat other people. It's about how you walk in your own life. And if everyone taps into that, the world will literally be transformed before our eyes.
I believe that. The sacred fire that we have burning in our lodge is a very special fire because it came from vision and it came from a spiritual mandate to light a fire of peace. And it was the buffalo that said, "To that fire of peace, the nations of your people will come for their healing and their renewal and resurgence of their cultures." And when I was strong enough that the doors of that lodge would open to the white people, black people, and yellow people, because they were equally searching for the essence of the Creator, the essence of the meaning of life, and how to express that meaning of life in the world. And so, the doors of our lodge open so that we could offer that to people, not to change them into being indigenous in our tradition, but to offer them an opportunity to sit at a fire that had such a powerful essence of the Creator in it that they could make their own prayers to find their own way. So I really appreciate what you've said because, the fire grows your spirit. It strengthens you for the work you need to do in the world. And, one of the ceremonies that we had a number of years ago now, we typically will go after midwinter ceremonies in our longhouse. We typically go into the lodge and light our own sacred fire. And we ask that sacred fire, what is it, that would be our spiritual mandate for this coming year? How do we serve you best, Creator, in this coming cycle? And we get many different kinds of directions because that fire came from a vision and it was lit in 1994. And so we'd ask, each year. So this final year that we asked that question was probably about, I want to say 6-7 years ago now. Asking that question and the Creator's voice boomed inside that lodge and it said, "Take the fire into the world." And we thought at the time, it was a really clear message. We thought at the time, well, we're doing a lot of international work. We're teaching in different places. The fire is traveling. We're taking ceremonies. We're helping people to heal. We're traveling among our own First Nations. There's a resurgence of culture among our own people that is just magnificent. And yet, when I was offered that opportunity to work at CAMH and work inside a structure, a corporate structure, a clinical structure, I was never really sure how that fire was going to manifest in the world. But what I understand to be the truth today is that our journey is to change those systems that exist. That's where it's at. We need to change the systems that exist so that they are compassionate systems, that they are altruistic, that they are loving and caring systems, that they are equitable for all people, that they uphold the beautiful diversity of humanity and not value one over the other. So, we have some real changes that we need to be able to bring to the world. But it's the spiritual people from all traditions that are going to lead that change, because you can only bring change spiritually, with a spiritual conviction and spiritual power that we have not yet seen manifest in those systems. And that's where the fundamental error is. You cannot separate the creator from the systems that are working to serve the people. When George Washington, Benjamin Franklin were developing, the Declaration of Independence for the United States, they separated church from their politics, from their government. They separated that. And that was the single most fundamental error that they made in designing their government system, because nowhere are those politicians in any colonial government system, not just the U.S., none of them feel that they are responsible to the Creator for their decisions and for their actions. And that is human failure in a nutshell.
So what do you feel is, I don't want to leave our listeners hanging. At this moment in time, I mean, we're sitting here March 24th, we're recording. I think that we have many long weeks and months ahead of us as we work through this change, this crisis, whatever you want to call it. What do you feel at this point? Because I would 100% I'm going to get you back on, in the very near future, because I want to bring these teachings out. But for our listeners today, what are a couple of things, or how do you see the road forward right now? Because people are panicking. We're directionless. We don't really know which way to go. So do you have any guidance for us today?
I think it's human nature when you are used to something and then somebody takes it away from you, that you don't know how to behave, you don't know how to relate to anyone, you live in a state of trauma. This is a traumatic event, and as much as, we're all experiencing it now, when this cools down, we're going to see the rise in mental illness like we've never seen it before, and the people that are going to be flocking to get the help that they need to stabilize themselves. So, my best advice is that, in this time period that we have, that individuals reach for a faith tradition, no matter, and, your listeners are all across the board in terms of, cultures and faith traditions and racial backgrounds and languages and so on, which is really beautiful. But, not everybody has a practicing tradition. And so I really encourage your listeners to develop a daily spiritual discipline, a practicing faith tradition that is good for you, that stabilizes you in your spirit, your heart, your mind, and your body, so that you can start to feel grounded in what is going on, that you don't fear, that you don't panic, that you know that the Creator has everything in control. That's how I live my life. And I've gone through a lot of trauma in my own life and trauma recently, but I always say the Creator has a reason for everything that happens. The Creator has control. And when I give up, I must, as a human being, give up control of my life to the Creator, then magnificent things happen. So, we're all going to face rough times and difficult challenges, but meeting those challenges with faith, with a positive mind, with a good heart, with understanding what is peace, understanding what is love, what is forgiveness, what is compassion. We're going to make it through this, and we're going to thrive on the other end. And we'll never, and what I like to think about that makes me happy every day is that we're never going to go back to be the same as what we were. This this is the crucible. This is the turning point. This is the transformational piece that is going to bring humanity to its knees.
And, I think a lot of people hearing that, automatically, because most people don't like change. And I think, I've always looked at this and said, I'm optimistic. I really feel like there needs to be a change. We cannot keep going like we have been going. So I just, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your teachings, and for everything that you're doing. And I know that you folks out there listening to this, for many of you, especially longtime listeners of the show, no doubt this is resonating with you. And the reason why Diane and I wanted to get together, just to sort of wrap us up here, is something that you actually said to me, Diane. You said we need hope nowadays. That's the one thing that we really need. And for you guys listening out there, I don't see a lot of hope in the public discourse and the rhetoric out there. There's a lot of fear-driven activity. There's a lot of fear-driven narrative. There's panic. And I think from my side, I would like to encourage us all to pull together as a community, to pull together in the same direction, to put our differences aside and learn from one another, but move again into that place of love and peace and cooperation, because I think it's the only way we're going to get through this. There's no other way. We're definitely not going to get through it as individuals on our own. I can't see that happening. So thank you, Diane, so much. And I think, as I said, I want to get you back on the show more frequently, and perhaps some of your community members who have teachings to offer, and that would be very valuable for people around the world. So any final words from your side, Diane?
Well, I just want to congratulate the listeners, because I see that Toronto is pretty much a ghost town, and that people are following direction. And what I want to say is that, help each other, be kind to each other, and be compassionate to one another. Share what you have, because there's a law out there, and that law is the more that you give, the more that you receive. And so, never fear scarcity. Never fear that, because we live in a place of abundance. When you give and you share and you help others, much, much more will come back to you.
Beautiful.
Thank you for
Beautiful.
your patience.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And for everyone listening out there, I truly hope you enjoyed today's show. This particular episode is a very special episode for me. This is a highlight in the podcast for me. It's been 3.5 years now, and this was one that I had earmarked from day one. So I hope to bring you more of this, and you have yourself a beautiful day wherever you are. Thanks so much for tuning in.